Alright, so it's been a while since I've done one of these, but did like a total drama Pocket 2 Island thing a while back with JoJo characters, and I might do some more JoJo stuff in Total Drama Collab, maybe like with part 4, but I decided to do something a little different this time. It's a TDI Revenge versus Redux Edition What If. Basically, it's the challenges from season 1 of Total Drama Island, but instead of the OG cast, it's it's Gen 2, the Revenge of the Island cast on one team versus the Redux, or like the most recent one, the Renew team. And so there's 22 campers in the original. This version there's going to be 24 because there's going to be no returning campers, which means that one person's going to get eliminated each round, and it'll just sort of work out naturally. These guys in the middle I had to get rid of. I got rid of the earliest boots from each season to get an even dozen on each team. So for Revenge, I only had to get rid of Stacy, which, let's be real, would have been the first boot in any scenario anyway. And then for the reboot team, I got rid of Axel, Nichelle, and this Justin clone whose name I cannot remember. Caleb. Yeah, so I got rid of these guys. So, and oh right, and her too. I don't know why. Yeah, I had to get rid of Crazy Girl as well, which sucks because she's based, but whatever. So this is what the teams look like. Yeah, this is Team Revenge. This is Team Renew, whatever, Redux. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, episodes 1 and 2 is the same like challenge, and one person gets eliminated. On through like nobody gets eliminated episode 1, so I'm just combining these. So, for the challenge, Dakota and Anne Maria are not going to jump because, they're both vain and, like, they're going to be like, ew, I'm not jumping in the water. Joe would force them to go in. She would successfully push Dakota in like Lashana did to Heather, but Anne Maria's going to fight back. Also, her hair is like an invincible shield, so I don't think Joe could get through that once Anne Maria knows that the threat is on after she shoves Dakota in. Everyone on Team Renew would jump, though, which means that they get the hot tub advantage. I know that Damien seems like he wouldn't do it, but now that the hockey guys are on the same team as him, which they weren't in the actual season, I think they could convince him to do it since it is the first episode, and he would probably want to do it for team morale. So I think he would do it. Now, because B is like a genius, he would even out the odds a bit because he could single-handedly build the tub. But I think Team Renew still wins the challenge overall because Joe and Anne Maria would probably hold them back while they're still fighting. And not to mention, like, Scott would want to sabotage them, obviously. Mike's MPD would probably get in the way. Meanwhile, this team I feel like would have much more overall cohesion. Like, yeah, Emma would still like beef with Chase, and like Ripper would be like the worst. But like overall, I think they'd have less issues than Team Revenge here, especially because they have the advantage from the cliff dive. So I think they are going to win here. Other character interactions. Sometimes, this is sort of the challenge of this character interaction. Sometimes there's going to be overlap between the two, but like you'll get it. Yeah, Bowie and Emma would still become friends, and the whole beef with Chase would still happen. A lot of people on Team Revenge would want B to be the team leader, and obviously Joe would push back if she wants to be the leader, but most people would be like, shut the fuck up, I don't care. Because originally, like, they, it's like half the people, and they never really get to, like, win with B on their team, so they never really like acknowledge his usefulness, I guess. But now that like they still wouldn't win here, but like he would get them close, so I think they would recognize like, hey, this guy should probably be the team leader. Obviously on this team the hockey guys are going to be the leaders because like of course they like who else is going to be, and Damien would still want to quit. Alright, so in terms of who I think is going to be eliminated, first, it's going to be Anne Maria. It's obviously going to be between her and Joe because they're the ones that are fighting and being annoying and holding them back the most. But I think it would be pretty close, but I think Anna Maria would get slightly more votes because at least Joe was jumped and was competitive in a way that actually helped the team, whereas Anna Maria was not. So like Joe was annoying, Anna Maria was also annoying and also held the team back challenge wise, so I think she goes here. Alright, so this is what it looks like now. Alright, so episode 3 was the big sleep. The challenge is literally just one person on whoever lasts the longest, their whole team wins. That's what, like Gwen beat Duncan, so her whole team wins. So there's no like averages or anything. So in terms of who I think is lasting the longest, I think it's probably MK. She seems not only very crafty, but also she seems like the kind of person that would find some weird trick to stay awake, and not like a fake one where she cheats. Like she would actually like figure out a way to do it fairly. Which is weird because she does seem like a cheater, but like I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's the beanie, but like she gives me the vibe that she would be able to win this like pretty easily. Not to mention Scott would be trying to sabotage the people on his team by like making them tired or like, making them go sleepy beepy. So I don't know. We'll see. And like nobody on this team I don't think anybody on this team would be that good at this challenge. Like maybe Brick because of military boot camp. Maybe Dawn. I don't even think Dawn, honestly. I think Brick would be like decent and the rest of these guys are like out cold. Yeah, so I think Team Renu wins once again. So character interactions this time, Zoe and Mike are obviously going to have like an ooh-woo moment. Yes, I did type that, fight me. Sam would go full gamer mode like early on. Like he would see everything as pixelated because, he wouldn't have sleep, so he would go insane, and he also wouldn't have gaming, so he would go insane. I think Dawn and B would form like a friendship, not necessarily a romantic connection, just like a regular like bond. Because this challenge isn't physically dangerous, at least not as much as the other ones, I think Damien would gain some more confidence, especially because his team won, so I think his morale would be boosted enough to not want to kick himself off the show anymore. And I think he would actually ask to join Priya and Millie's alliance, since they seem generally like the most amicable and supportive to him in that cast. I think they would hesitate, but ultimately say yes, because he's not a shady guy, and I think that'd be enough. I mean, like, Millie and Priya disagreed on tactics a lot, and they literally even said yes to Julie at one point, so I see no reason why they would say yes to the much less threatening Damien. And then, of course, Z is going to trip balls and get knocked out immediately. Like, first one out is Z, no question. Okay, so Team Revenge loses again. In terms of who's getting voted out, it's going to be Sam. He appears to be particularly useless because, he's, like going insane. And in the actual canon season of Revenge of the Island, Sam got voted out for kind of the same reason, except he was the closest one to winning, and they still voted him out. This time, he's even less useful, because he doesn't have any impressive moments at all. So I think Lightning and Joe would both want him out, because he's like, oh, he's useless. And I feel like they could probably convince enough people to do it, especially because this is their second loss, so they don't want to get rid of any strong players. Dakota would feel bad for him, kind of like in the show, but I don't think she would intervene. I don't think she would vote for him necessarily, but I don't think she would try to sway anyone against it, because like I just don't see that happening. So yeah, Sam is gone. Alright, so this is what it looks like now. So for episode 4, Dodgeball. Okay, this one was actually pretty easy to figure out, because I mean, like, so in each thing, I think there has to be an even number of people on the court at one time, and I could be wrong, but I think certain people have to sit out. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. I'm pretty sure Team Revenge sweeps here, because I mean, Lightning is here, and he like hard carries. Like, yes, there are people on this team like the hockey guys and Bowie and like Priya who would be, are pretty athletic, but like this team has Lightning. Lightning alone is crazy. Not to mention They also have Brick, who could do like a Duncan strategy. Duncan was like, here's something I learned in prison. Brick could be like, I learned in the military, which might be even more useful. They also have Joe, who's a pretty aggressive asset. I think Cameron would be really good at this because he would like measure the like aerodynamics of the balls and whatnot. B is here. Yes, he's a big target, but like I think he could also figure something out. Mike has Svetlana. Zoe at this point is still pretty meek, so I don't think she's gonna go like commando skill yet. But I do think Scott would also be useful because I don't think he would throw this challenge. It's just too obvious of a throw. So I think he would want to. Plus, he wouldn't want to get hit in the face with a ball. So like I'm pretty sure he would just go for it. So like most of the people on this team have use. Like this team, like some of them are useful, but like even like the hockey guys, they play hockey, not dodgeball. And like Priya would be good at dodging, but like somebody like Lightning or Joe and Brick going on so like I don't think these guys can win. I think Team Revenge wins this pretty handedly. Yeah, Zoe and Mike would distract each other from the challenge a little bit. Again, I still think their team would win though. Emma would self-sabotage because of Chase, which would give Team Revenge an even more of an edge. Julia is still laying low at this point, so Julia's not useful to like their team going like sicko mode on the other team yet. And right, Ripper would ruin it for everybody. So guess who gets voted out? Yeah, it's Ripper because he sucks. So moving on. This is what it looks like now. All right, so episode 5. Oh right, yeah. So I accidentally wrote this one before the talent show one, so I'm just going to pretend that this one came first, and that's just going to be how it goes. So, in this challenge, Brick would shit himself in the dark. He's doing that, and people would probably make fun of him for it. F in the chat. Dakota would also be scared. I think now, with Dakota being scared, Mike and Zoe are infatuated with each other. And I think out of everyone else here, like Dawn and B are kind of doing their own thing. I think Scott would actually be the one to comfort her because she seems ripe for manipulation. And I think he would definitely notice that and take advantage of that. I think Scott would probably, she'd be like, hey, it's okay, like the sensitive side. But also, like, he would know, like, defeat her ego and stuff. It would be pretty easy to do, I think, for him. You're right, yeah. I think Manitoba would be useful here. He could dig for useful shit in the forest, and obviously that would put Zoe off because he'd be like, hey, good day, mate, and Zoe would be like, what the hell? Lightning would definitely scream shabam, and a bear would come over, like with Izzy the bear, except it'd be a real bear, and that would definitely get them in trouble. Yeah, and I also think Raj and Bowie would form a bond earlier because the thing about the first season of Total Drama, it was a lot less hectic than the later seasons, especially the ones with Gen 2, 3, and 4. So I think they would have more time, more breathing room to form a bond, not necessarily dating yet, but we'll get to that. Katie and Sadie are not here, so nobody's going to get lost. It's really, so at that point, it's really just a matter of which team gets there faster. And I think it would be pretty close, because this one, you can't just say Lightning wins or like Bowie wins or whatever, because the whole team needs to get there. So it's really just a matter of who's getting there last. And again, like Scott would still try to sabotage his team, so he would I think he would trip someone, and even besides that, I think out of everyone here, Cameron is the slowest. He could hitch a ride on Lightning's back, but I don't know if he'd do that. I don't know if he'd think of that this early in the game, because he only did that because they made a deal. I think, and even then, Scott could trip Cameron, Scott could trip somebody else, and it would hold them back. This team, they're all fairly competitive. Bowie, Julia, even before Crazy Julia, Damien, all of them should have no problem running at a decent speed to get there. So I think they would win. Only other thing here is that I think Scott would want to pick off the Brainiac threats, which would be B and Cameron, because he targeted B in canon, and I think he would also target Cameron. But in terms of who I think would be eliminated, I think it would be Cameron. Between him and B obviously has a much better standing as the team leader, and he also has Dawn as an ally, and Dawn would be wary of Scott, so he would find it easier to go for Cameron instead. And I think, yeah, he, Lightning, and Joe would all gang up on him because, he's weak and not all that sociable. I think Scott could also manipulate Mike and Zoe to vote for him by lying, trying to about him trying to sabotage the relationship. It's very early on, and they have no reason not to trust Scott yet. So, Mike and Zoe. So I think they would probably buy it. Yeah, and at that point they would already have 5 votes against Cameron, and even if the other votes somehow weren't split amongst other people and all targeted like Scott or something, I still think Cameron loses the tiebreaker because it'd most likely be physical. So I think he's gone here. All right. Now it looks like this. Okay, so now the talent show is going to happen. So I think for Team Revenge, you get Mike, Brick, and B. Mike would do Svetlana and flips and stuff, and he would get an 8. Brick's fashion show would get a 5 because obviously he's kind of like insecure about his passion for fashion. Yeah, that rhymed. And so, he'd kind of get in his own head, and Chef would be like, alright, that was kind of mid, I'll give it a 5. And then B would do something really impressive, like he would like create like the cool machine 3000, so he would get a 9. Julia would do an influencer like Charlie D'Amelio style like stream, and I think that would get a 6. Chase would do like a David Dobrik style video, which would be a lot more obnoxious, and so Chef would give it a 3. And then Wayne and Raj would get a 7 for doing like a hockey, like, like sporting montage, and they would probably like crash into each other, and I think Chef would think that it would be funny and charming, so he'd give it a 7. So overall, that means the Revenge team wins because they have 22 and Team Renew has 16. So Team Revenge wins the talent show. Other character interactions of note here. I think Scott would choose to ease off Dawn and B because they have a numbers and skill advantage over him, so he doesn't want to make that risk so early. And I think he would focus more on trying to get Dakota to do what he wants. I think Raj and Wayne would get more romantic with each other, and MJ would probably record them kissing or something as blackmail. And I think Julia would take note of this. And I think also Damien would probably respect Priya more than Millie just because she's more, like, outgoing and, like, I don't know. I think he would just respect her more as, like, a player and an ally, and I think that would make Millie intensely jealous. So there would definitely be some beef there. And she would start writing, like, insane, like, Greg Heffley shit in her, like, journal. Yeah, as far as who goes here, though, it's going to be Chase. The reason I think it's going to be Chase here is because, he did perform the worst in the talent show out of anyone on either team. He's generally just kind of annoying. Obviously, Emma and Bowie don't like him. And I think they would convince Priya's alliance to vote for him. So, I think he would go there. Especially because Bowie is, as we know, is super convincing and charismatic. So I think he's able to get 5 votes against him, like, pretty easily. So now it looks like this. Okay, so episode 7 is the Phobia Factor one, where they have to face their fears. So I just kind of jotted down, like, who couldn't face their fear, because I thought it would be easier that way. So, Scott can't face Fang, obviously. There are times where he wins, but he's always a coward. Lightning can't not eat his protein, so he would lose. Mike would not reveal his multiple personality yet. And I think everyone else here would probably get a point. I think Zoe probably would get support from Mike to do it. Brick is known for braving his fears, like in the show. I think he'd do it. Joe could probably do it. And then Dawn and Dakota, even though they are, like, not exactly the most, like, tooth and nail fighting type people, I think they could probably do whatever it is for the team. And B too. B will admitted, like his name was Beverly, so I think he'd also do it. Right, on the other team, Millie's obviously not going to reveal her journal. Z couldn't get off that cush. And everyone else on Team Renew, again, I think they would get the point. So he doesn't and she doesn't, but these guys, I think they would do it. His Raj might just straight up have to admit he's gay, and I think he would be able to do that. Bowie, I could see facing his fear. Damien, again, I think he's in a much different place than he would be in the actual show. I think he could do it. Priya could do it. Emma's pretty visceral when it comes down to it. Julia could do it. I think they're gonna be able to do it. So Team Revenge has 6 points. Team Renew has 8. But in the original, Chris gave Team Base the chance to win again. So that every contestant had a reason to face their fear. So I think he would do that with Brick being stuck in the dark, and his honorable code would push him to do it. And also, I think his team members would genuinely be supportive, including Joe, because, there are times when she is kind of supportive. So I think they would win for his team, which is kind of bullshit, but you know what? Whatever. So, right, some character interactions. After Scott gets mauled by Fang, I think Dakota would, ask if he's okay, and he would, genuinely appreciate it, but he would still just use her as a tool. He'd be like, yeah, I'm not, I think Zoe would get increasingly off-put by Mike's refusal to reveal his secret, and that would create more tension between them. I think Joe and Brick would have a newfound respect for each other, even though Joe would still kind of treat him like crap because it's Joe. Damien and Priya would obviously find Millie sussy because she doesn't want to reveal the Death Note. And MK now has the blackmail on the gay couple. So, but obviously now she also wants to get info on Millie's journal because she's sneaky like that and she wants to have dirt on everybody. You know how it is. Now, so that means that Team Renew loses, and as much as it's a shame to say, it's really, obviously it's going to be between Millie and Z since they were the ones who didn't do the challenge, but, it's, Z is the one going because not getting off that Zaza is still more embarrassing than the journal. If somebody told you, they're not going to reveal the journal, you would at least be like, okay, I get it, maybe it's personal, but, a stoner not being able to get off that cush, I'm thinking, nah, that's a little more embarrassing. So, yeah, I think Z is going home here. This is what it looks like now. Okay, episode 8 is Up the Creek. This is the one where they go to Boney Island and then there's the statue. So, right. Team Renew pedals to and back from Boney Island faster overall because they have to go in pairs. So, for example, Lightning and Joe would be a pair, Mike and Zoe, Dawn and B, Scott and Dakota, and I guess Brick would, I don't know, maybe go by himself. Whereas over here you have Priya and Damien, I think they'd go pretty fast. Bowie and Emma, they'd go pretty fast. Dwayne and Raj would get there first, and then MK and Millie would probably be the slowest out of everyone here, but still. Whereas, this team, Lightning and Joe would probably go pretty fast, but, otherwise, I don't really see any of the other teams catching up with most of the teams here. So I think they would get faster on the voyage both there and back. However, these guys have B, which means lighting the fire is, super duper easy, and would happen much faster than this team. So I think it's about even in terms of speed of the challenge, but what gives one team the advantage is that somebody's picking up the statue, and I just said it. It's going to be MK. I think out of everyone here, she's the most likely to snatch it and, not hear that it's actually unlucky. So, unfortunately for her, MK is picking up the statue, not knowing that it's bad luck. Right. Because Millie has to pick a different canoe than both Damien and Priya, and they're both hyper-focused on the challenge since it is kind of a speed-type challenge. She would go full Shadow the Hedgehog is a bitch-ass motherfucker on her. She would go full, Light Yagami Death Note unhinged things about Damien. I think Bowie would see this and would decide that it's a good time to take advantage of that. So she would, Bowie would try to drag her into his alliance instead of Priya's, because, the more the merrier. Again, Bowie has a very high charisma stat, so I think he would do that very easily. Joe and Lightning would form an alliance calling themselves the best around. Nothing's ever going to keep them down, so they're going to, do that. And then I think at this point, now that he has the time with her, I think Scott fully has Dakota under her thumb. She believes basically everything he tells her. Yeah. Oh, right, and Zoe is still infatuated, yet frustrated with Mike, of course. And, and Scott would tell Dakota that Dawn and B are bad news because, he was, sort of outnumbered and outskilled before, but now that he has an ally against them, that could plant a potential seed for him to do some dirty work later on. So, with that in mind, because MK got the statue, their team loses. Because, again, the speed is, overall even, but obviously the unlucky statue would make them unlucky and they would lose. So, who's going home? It's going to be Wayne. This one was a little difficult to put together because I couldn't really figure out who was going to go home without thinking about it pretty hard. But I ultimately decided that I think MK would figure out before it's too late that the statue is bad, and she would frame Wayne for it because out of everyone here, I think he's probably the most aloof, and I think most people would buy it if, she framed him for making that mistake. Besides Raj, of course. But, everyone else would be like, yeah, you know what? That was kind of cringe. So, I think Raj would get most of the vote. Probably everybody besides him and Raj would probably vote him off, unfortunately, for Wayne. So, I think he's gone. Alright, so this is what it looks like now. Got a little empty square here. It's a P. The next one... Oh, right. It's the Paintball Deer Hunter one. Okay, so this one was weird. I had to select the hunters randomly. For this team, I got Lightning, Brick, and Mike. And for the team on the right, I got Raj, Damien, and MK. I think it's pretty obvious who's winning this challenge. Again, Lightning is a massive force of nature. Brick has the military coordination, so I think he would probably be able to get a good strategy to get a lot of these guys out. And Mike has multiple personalities that could help him here. I don't think any of these people would be horrible hunters necessarily. MK does have some skills she could use. Damien could be determined. Raj is sporty. But, compared to these three, sorry, it's not happening. Not to mention, as far as people who could dodge, I think that, Joe and Zoe would be pretty hard to hit. Dawn and Dakota are pretty small targets. Scott would probably set traps everywhere that might incapacitate, everybody, including people on this team. It could also include people on this team, but, still, though, I think, he wouldn't want to get shot again, so he would probably not do the sabotage this episode as much. So I think that's bad news for this team, really. And B is a big target, but he's also very smart. Pretty much everyone on this team has some sort of advantage. Can't really say the same for this one. Even the only person I could see maybe surviving is Bowie, and even then, I think that's a major if, because if there's an all-out assault from these three, I don't know. And Priya is athletic, but I think she's probably gonna get hit at some point. So yeah, with that, obviously Team Revenge is winning this. Character interactions. I think Raj would obviously be mad at MK for, framing Wayne. I think he would know that she did it. And, MK would, gaslight him and be like, no. And, I think Raj would tell Bowie about the situation because, now that Wayne is gone, he's the closest thing he has to an ally. But Bowie, being strategic, like he did in the canon, would be like, listen, I can't be seen like, being an ally with you because like we like each other, so it's like bad for the game. Um, and Millie getting out so easily, and talking to Priya again, I think would chill her out and she would stop being as jealous. But of course, she already wrote what she did and she would forget to erase it. And Bowie, I think, would find the notebook before MK or Julia. Bowie already had ties to Millie, so he could probably do it most easily. And this would obviously, big threat. And, obviously that means he would use it to get Millie in his back pockets, do whatever he wants, because he's holding the notebook over her head as blackmail. So on Team Revenge, I think Scott would set traps, generally, like, for, people on the other team, but, like, also, like, he would want to get Dawn and B to, like, mess with them. But I think they would dodge it. And I think instead of them falling into one of his traps, I think Zoe would end up in it. And I think, Zoe being in danger, Mike would, this would trigger the OG Mike personality to come back and save her. And then I think Dawn would know that, like, know how that whole thing works because she can read auras and stuff. And she would explain to Zoe, like, why Mike did what he did and acts the way he does. Sort of like in canon, but maybe a little more clear this time because of, this events that transpired. And I think, Zoe would thank her and she would be a little bit more amicable towards Mike. I mean, she already likes him regardless, but like she would be less indecisive, but still indecisive overall. So once again, Team Renew loses. And unfortunately, I think Damien's going here. Again, this was a bit of a difficult one to figure out because I don't really see anyone here with a clear target on their back, aside from Bowie maybe, but he has way too much control to be voted out. I think that Bowie would keep Millie around for leverage, obviously, and would want to weaken Priya's alliance. So really, he would either target Priya or Damien, but I don't think he wants to get rid of Priya because A, she's a much better, like, more useful team member, and B, obviously, if she gets rid of Priya, then the leverage she has over Millie kind of becomes pointless. So, because, Millie obviously cares about, like, Priya's opinion way more than Damien's, like, that's obvious. So, I think they would force... I think Bowie would force Millie to vote with him and Emma against Damien. And, MK and Raj would vote for each other because they have the beef. So these two votes are already not going toward the loser. And then you already have 3 going towards Damien. So it's actually... Right, the only way they could counter that is if you had Priya, Damien, and Julia all vote for the same person. And I don't see that happening. I mean, Damien and Julia, I could see, obviously, because they're in an alliance, but... or in Priya. But Julia, like, I don't see her voting, like, for... I don't see her voting with these guys because she still wants to lay low. She wouldn't want to, like, create beef with Bowie yet, so I think Damien's going here. Alright, so this is what it looks like now. Episode 10 is this is the one where they made the 3-course meal for Chef. Once again, this is a perfect opportunity for Scott to sabotage his team. And not only that, but, oh right, I also forgot to mention that Scott would find the immunity idol. But yeah, he has it there. Not only would Scott want to sabotage his team by putting, like, cringe sauce in the food or something, but nobody on this team knows how to cook. Do not let them cook. It's a bad idea. We already know from Eat, Puke, and Be Wary that Lightning, Zoe, and Scott do not know how to cook at all. Mike and Joe, I don't really see them knowing how to cook. Same thing with Dawn and Dakota. B is a smart guy, but he's more of a handyman than a culinary master. I don't really see B knowing how to cook. I could see him maybe trying to, like, helping the kitchen not explode, but, like, besides that, like, I don't really see it. The only person here I think might be kind of useful is Brick, and even then, not really. He would just make it, like, more stomachable, but not actually, like, good or decent. Meanwhile, on this team, I think there are actually people who would be kind of good at it. Nobody here is like Gordon Ramsay, but, you know, I think, like, Priya's probably pretty well-rounded. I think Millie might be pretty well-rounded. Bowie could probably figure out how to make a decent meal. Maybe Emma, too. You know, like, maybe not Julia because, like, influencer or whatever. But, like, I think these guys, if they put their heads together, they could probably make something, like, okay. Whereas these guys would make something, like, mediocre at best and probably pretty bad. So I think Team Renew wins the challenge here. Character interactions. So, this is where Julia begins to get more unhinged because, you know, she sees her team is falling apart. She doesn't like it. And now she's getting bossy and she's getting crazy. Scott would sabotage the food without getting caught, and especially because it wasn't even that great to begin with, so I think he does that pretty easily. I think at this point, Raj would explode in MK, like he can't hold it in anymore, and she would continue to gaslight him, and this would put a target on Raj's back. Raj and Bowie would sneak out for some time alone, and Lightning would accidentally stumble upon them, and then he would say, "It's cool, bro. Lightning don't judge." And then he would walk away because based. Yeah. Yeah, I think Lightning would just be like, "Yeah, all right, cool, bro. That's crazy." Anyway, and then I wrote something down here. What was it? Oh, right. Bowie would still be like, "No, we can't, even though I love you." And, you know, they would do that whole thing. And Raj would reluctantly agree, but, you know, he's like, "Please help me with MK because she's very cringe." And Bowie would be like, "Fine." Also, there's a team switch here because this is episode 10, and, you know, I thought it would be funny to have a team switch. And I decided that it would be Scott and Julia because in the original, in Revenge of the Island, they switched Scott and Joe because, you know, they're intended to be like the main antagonists of each of their teams. Scott would still be the main antagonist of the Revenge team, but now that Julia's getting into her more unhinged phase, her unhinged character arc, she would be the main villain of this team, meaning that these two are going to switch. So now the teams would look like this, and you might have noticed that somebody else is not here, and that person is Joe. The reason Joe is going home now is because Dawn and B were going to convince Mike and Zoe to vote Scott, but because he is no longer on their team, obviously the next most antagonistic threat would be Joe. Especially because I think she would be super, like, pushy and annoying during this challenge, despite the fact that she wouldn't actually be very helpful. And I think pretty much everyone here would, you know, find that pretty annoying. So, yeah. Right, and yeah, this is what it looks like now. So Joe's not here anymore. Now Julia's on this team, and Scott is on this team. So, right, this is the Who Can You Trust challenge. So there were 3 different parts of this. There was the rock climbing, there was the blowfish dinner, and then there was the obstacle course. So I think that for the rock climbing, oh yeah, and these are the teams that I put together. These weren't randomly selected. I think Chris intentionally, well, obviously he did. He put teams together that he thought would have a hard time trusting each other. So I think Dawn and Julia are a team because Dawn would be able to read Julia's aura and be like, "There is a darkness that lurks within you." And then obviously Priya and Millie still have like that whole tension of, you know, the notebook and like the blackmail and everything. I think that Julia's determination would win them the challenge here. These two would probably have an anxiety attack somewhere mid-through. Julia would just be determined to, like, climb the hell through. So they win that. For the blowfish dinner, so Mike and Zoe, obviously they still have, like, the wishy-washy, like, relationship thing. And then Raj and MK have beef, so they would be put in a team. I think that Mike would one of his personalities would screw up the meal, and that would poison Zoe, and that would cause, again, Mike to come back and save her for a second time. Whereas with these two, I think MK would constantly taunt Raj and, try to, like, tease him, be like, oh, am I going to poison it? Oh, I don't know. And she ultimately wouldn't, because obviously she still wants to win, and also, like, poisoning somebody intentionally is probably too far for her. But she would, like, make fun of him for it. He would eat it, they would win, and she'd be like, hi, you thought I was going to poison you, what a loser. And then finally, the obstacle course. So I put Lightning and Brick together because, honorary code, whereas Lightning's like a Sigma male jock. And then you have Scott and Bowie, who, like, I just have a feeling would really not like each other. Just because of, like, very different personalities. Yeah, I think, actually I have to go back to my notes for that one. I think, right, Scott and Bowie would win that because, Lightning would run into, like, a tree head first, and Scott wouldn't be able to sabotage Bowie because he's too savvy, so he would just accept, alright, we're going for it. And, obviously that would kind of strike a, chord of, animosity between them because, they're on to each other and they're both kind of crafty. But yeah, I think Brick is pretty clumsy and Lightning is an idiot, so they lose, meaning that these guys win, and that means that these guys win 2-1, so Team Renew wins this challenge. And Scott, I guess. What else? Did I miss anything here? Oh, right. Yes. I think MK, because she likes stealing shit, she would try to steal Scott's immunity idol, but Scott would carve out a fake. Because that's what he did in the original. And I think she would steal the fake thinking it's the real one. And I think Scott would realize this. And so he would be, he and Bowie would be like, listen, we don't like each other, but I think we have a common enemy here. Yeah. And also, like, she's just made too many enemies, because, like, obviously now Scott wants her out, and Raj also has beef with her, and they're both, have this connection to Bowie, who's a powerful player, so now there's 3 votes against her. Actually 4, because he has Emma, too. And I think literally everyone would give her a dirty look and she'd get voted out. Like, she just has too many enemies at this point. She's like the opposite of the Demon Slayer guy. And, she would also do, like, the haha, I have the invincibility idol, but then it would be fake, so, haha funny. And I think Scott and Raj would both laugh at her as she leaves for different reasons, but, it'd be sort of cathartic. And, it's also worth mentioning that Scott is wary of Bowie as a formidable opponent because he's like, yeah, I can't trick this guy. This guy's pretty good. Especially now that he knows about the invincibility statue, because in order for Scott to convince Bowie to, like, vote the way he wanted, he had to admit that he has the invincibility statue to prove that MK still and that she can't be trusted and needs to get out. So yeah, that's an extra piece of info he had to get rid of. He had to let Bowie in on. So now now the teams look like this. I also forgot to mention, I think at this point Zoe and Mike would come clean about his MPT only to Zoe, not to anybody else. But because, his personality came back twice and they've always sort of liked each other, I think at this point he'd be like, listen, I have MPD, but me love you anyway. And she'd be like, oh, so cute. And they would, hit it off from there. Anyway, episode 12. This is the basics training. This is where Chef Hatchet Boot Camp Master comes in. Again, this is more of a last man standing type thing. So it's really just a matter of who's winning here. I think it came down to Priya and Brick, but I think Priya's going to win here because the last challenge was the hanging over a tree, and again, Brick is pretty clumsy. Priya is more well-rounded and trained because of all the training she went through with all the challenges and stuff from birth, and athletic. I think she wins this. Lightning and Julia obviously would seem like big threats in this, but I don't think they could get past the essay portion. Julia's too narcissistic, and Lightning can't write more than 10 words. So they're out. And then everyone else, I think, gets out at some point during the boot camp training. You know, B's arms are like short. You know, Mike's personalities are inconsistent. Bowie would probably get tired of it. Emma, you know, Scott would want to throw, so he doesn't even care. Millie obviously can't hang in there that long. I think it's just really comes down to Brick and Brick and Priya, and I think Priya's going to win here. Other character interactions this episode. I already covered the Scott thing. I think Scott would discover that Bowie has a thing for Raj, and he would hold that against Bowie's knowledge of his statue, so they now have mutually assured destruction. So they both have blackmail on each other, which means that now they both keep the secret and don't use it against the other person. So Brick... right, I already went over that. But yeah, Brick would make it pretty far, lose to Priya. I think Dakota would be like, hey, you know what, you did a good job. No sweat. And they would be kind of friendly toward each other. I said they begin to form a bond. I don't think it'd be like that serious because, again, I mean, she still trusts Scott over anybody else, but, you know. I think Priya would start to notice that Millie has been off because of the whole blackmail Death Note notebook situation. But she obviously can't say anything about it. Millie can't say anything about it, so Priya's just kind of left there hanging confused. So, Team Revenge are the losers of this challenge, and I think Dawn is going to go here. Basically, what I think would happen is Dakota votes for Dawn, Lightning votes for Dawn, Julia votes for Dawn, Dawn and B probably vote for Julia, but I think that Julia or Dakota could probably convince one of these, you know, some of these three to vote for her. You know, again, I mean, Scott, the seed that Scott planted, I think would sprout here. And I think that because this is the boot camp episode, even though Julia's mean, like, she would get pretty far. And I think that's something that, like, Brick would respect and, like, Zoe and Mike wouldn't like, but they would, you know, they wouldn't vote her on it. You know, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I didn't explain this one well, but yeah. Dawn, I think Dawn goes here. So now this is what it looks like. And now we have the final elimination challenge before the merge, which is the extreme torture one. So there was skydiving, there was the rodeo, and there was the flag race. So for the skydiving one, these were picked randomly. So I ended up getting Zoe versus Millie. Zoe, I think, is going to win here. Even though she's not commando yet, I still think she's more athletic than Millie, so she'd be more likely to hit the bullseye. They also have the same voice actress and somewhat similar personality, so I think they would sort of form like a friendly bond. And given that the merge is coming up very soon, I think that bond would actually last. But, you know, we'll get into that later. Then for the rodeo, it's B versus Scott. B is a pretty smart guy when it comes to, like, mechanical stuff, but I think that Scott would be able to do something to him, even though he doesn't trust him. Scott was still able to sabotage B in canon, even though B didn't trust him before, so he would probably still be able to do it again, so he would win that. And then in the flag race, again, Brick versus Priya, I think it's pretty obvious who's winning the athletic challenge. It's Priya. Which means that Team Renew wins this one because they win 2-1. So character interactions, there's not many. I already mentioned the Zoe and Millie friendship thing. And Bowie and Scott would still stagnate with their mutually assured destruction. So they would wait to play their hands against each other. And, you know, obviously they're both annoyed that they can't, like, manipulate each other. So, like, these guys have some beef. And, like, Bowie, it's worth noting that Bowie has control over, like, pretty much everyone else on this team. Like, blackmail Millie. Raj is in love with him. Emma is an ally. And Priya, well, he doesn't control Priya, but, like, obviously still outnumbers her. Um, but the problem is they can't turn him against Scott because he knows that if they did, Scott would use the idol and then he would just vote Bowie out, so that's a no-no. But they did end up winning anyway, so they actually don't have to vote anybody out. It would be these guys. The revenge team would have to vote somebody out. And I think the person going home is Brick. Essentially, Brick is voted out for the same reason that Harold gets voted out this episode in canon, minus the boobies. I think, he would take an L because he lost to Priya twice in a row, and he would also probably have a pretty bad wipeout. And, there's pretty much nobody else to blame here. Like, B also lost, but in a much less embarrassing way, and he's still kind of respected as, like, the team leader because he's just very smart and useful. Brick is certainly nobody, he's not, like, useless, but, like, out of everyone here, I think he's going home here. I think, probably the only people I could see maybe not voting for him, besides himself, obviously, are Zoe and Mike. I think these four are pretty easily voting for Brick here. I don't really see them voting for anybody else. Yeah. And, yeah. He would leave, though, with his head held high. And I think most of his teammates would respect him, besides Lightning and Julia, who wouldn't care. But, like, Mike and Zoe would respect him. Dakota and B would respect him, even though I think they would vote for him. And, yeah, that would be the thing. The other thing is, I think the reason people wouldn't vote for Julia, even though she's mean, is that they might think she has the invincibility statue. I think she kind of has that sort of, like, intense, almost, like, conniving, like, convincing kind of thing. I think some people might be hesitant to vote for her unless it was, like, absolutely necessary. And at this point, I don't think they would feel that way. So therefore, I think Brick is gone. Yeah. And then finally, we have the boys versus girls eating challenge. I happen to get 6 dudes and 6 girls here. In terms of who I think wins this challenge for the reward, it's the girls team. Simply because out of everyone here, Julia has the most iron stomach. Again, we know Scott and Lightning can't stomach that kind of food. Mike is kind of a scrawny guy. I don't think he could do it. Bowie and Raj, I think, would be okay at it. B is kind of a wild card. I don't know. Whereas over here, well, Zoe's not. But Priya got pretty far in the eating challenge. I think Emma, again, can be tenacious when she wants to be. Dakota, I think, also could maybe do decent at this because she kind of got over her fear of, like, being, like, prissy and, like, grossed out by stuff not as easily, so maybe she could do pretty well. But again, really the ultimate triumph card here is Julia. Like, nobody on this team is getting anywhere close to Julia here. Also, the guys have to eat balls because of the cow testicles, and they're not going to want to do that. So that's going to make the girls it's going to make it even easier for the girls to win. So ladies win this challenge. So, yeah, that is going to be part 1 for this video. That was very wordy, but part 2 will be out at some point in the future. I don't know when.